What's going on, y'all? It's your boy Cool Colas here, and you are now tuning into a new episode of the Pro-Black Blurred Kingdom podcast. Today I have an interesting topic, and I want to talk to you all about the black carbon copy trope and why I feel we should not be championing turning white characters into black ones. So this topic is something that I talked about a little while ago on social media at my Colas Creative Instagram page. And this is something that I feel that a lot of comic fans, and I would even say people who are not regular comic fans, recognize. Something that they see all the time. There are too many characters that are out there that are carbon copies of already white superheroes. So in other words, they are characters that are originally white and get turned into black characters, or a black version of that character gets made. So some people appreciate that, right? But others, they can't stand it. Everybody's kind of polarized on that subject. Some people hate it, some people love it. Personally, I feel the way about black carbon copies that I feel about Juneteenth, Kwanzaa, and Swahili. The reason why I brought those examples up is because I see the idea of something that is not of black origin being heavily celebrated and having that polarizing feeling of should we like this, should we not, in other spaces. So outside of comics, where again you're seeing a white character that's being turned into a black character, I see that in spaces such as holidays and languages and other things like that. Now, some of you probably are listening to me and they're like, Cool Colas, how could you sit there and dog Juneteenth like that? And dog Kwanzaa like that? And I could make a whole video on that, but I'll just say this. If you think about the idea of Juneteenth, it's not something that is black originated. It's something that was given to black people. It's the idea of celebrating the emancipation of black people. And it was something that I think we hold on to and has recently gotten popularized, but it's not something that black people themselves actually created. Same thing with Kwanzaa. Kwanzaa is one of those holidays where there's some funny style stuff that's kind of going on there. And a lot of people have an issue with Karinga, which was the guy who created that, and the fact that he was a little bit off code and all this other stuff. So those are just things that I think that people have an issue with feeling 100% behind it because it's not something that was originally bred from us. So in other words, there are good things that we can hold on to because we need it to some extent, because we need things in our culture. But at the same time, they're not things that were bred from us. Even Swahili. Swahili was a language that was given to us from the Arabs. So white Arabs essentially gave the language of Swahili to Africans. So it wasn't something that was bred from us either. So I'm trying to make that connection that these white characters that get turned into black characters, that ideal is parallel to these holidays that seem like they were black originated, are turned into black things, but they're not bred from us per se, or they're off code. So Dr. Claude Anderson, I don't know if you all know who that is, but if you don't, shame on you. Really, really shame on you. He's one of the greatest black educators that is still alive today. He has written books and made many speeches about how black people should move and the things that they should do in order to be able to thrive, in order to become or come out of their status as a economic, what's the word I'm looking for? As a economic underclass. And so he's talked a lot about our community and how we need to do certain things in order to stop that from happening to us, because this is something that's been happening to us for so long. And he's really done a lot of work and doesn't really get the clout really that he deserves to. And I really think that if you listen to some of the work that he does, it's very clear that he's very passionate about promoting and empowering black culture. Anyway, the reason why I brought him up is because in one of his speeches, he even said and referenced these three things that I just said, Juneteenth, Kwanzaa, and Swahili, and said that we as black people, we have to have some culture. So I say all this to say the black carbon copies, as much as I have a problem with them being based on white characters, having white origins and such, I know that we have to have some culture even in the blurred spaces, even in spaces where we see characters that are not necessarily bred from us, but are bred from white people per se. So I think that we need to have that understanding that this is why we shouldn't completely just throw black carbon copies away. However, there are a lot of things that we need to address with this trope. We need to call and accept it for what it is instead of seeing it as progress or that white people stand with us or recognize us, because typically that's where the ideology of supporting these types of things comes from. We need to basically look at this and say, this is not necessarily progress. This is for the sakes of diversity. So we need to stay away from accepting this as a token of white appreciation and their ploy for diversity, because ultimately that's done for two very, very big reasons. For one, it's a cash grab for them, and they know how to pull on your heartstrings, because a lot of you Negroes, if I'm being honest, are too damn gullible and will buy right into the shit. The second thing is, it makes them look as though they are deserving of respect and understanding and can now properly tell black stories, while also not being seen as racist for this desire to portray what they call people of color. They're not necessarily putting emphasis on you, but the idea that they spoke about you, the idea that they promoted you and made a character that's based on what you look like, makes them, in the eyes of all people, look not racist, and to some extent look what a lot of people would call woke. So essentially what I'm saying is, although we need these forms of culture in our lives, like to see black characters and those black characters to be able to inspire children to see people who look like them, we also need to keep in the back of our mind the other agendas that are being done and what that means and what that looks like. When white media producers do these things that they say they're doing, they know that they have your attention, and they will have your attention when they put out more of us, and they'll do that by any means, as long as they can get more views, get your attention, right? And they can make more money because of the views and the attention that they're getting. And at the end of the day, they have the safeguard to say, look, we have all these black characters that are being represented and that are being shown despite whether or not they were once this character, or it was once a white character or whatever. And they want to create that facade that now not only have they done something for black people, but any black person who tries to come against them for their lazy effort to help us, and more so their desire to help themselves, then they look like they're reaching because they're doing things that show that they stand with quote unquote people of color. So that's the thing that I typically see, and that's the thing that I tell you that a lot of you really gullible ass Negroes just fall for. A lot of you all see this type of stuff and you all just go gaga over it. You're like, oh my God, look at these white people. They see us. We've made progress in this world. Look what they do. So many of you may think that I'm reaching. And I'm being totally honest. Many of you probably think I'm reaching when I say this, but I need you to think about it from the perspective of what happened with Walt Disney. Now, A lot of y'all may not know this either, but Walt Disney was a very, very, very big time racist. And even some of his old cartoons that we used to watch as kids were anti-black. But here we are now watching shit like Princess and the Frog, thinking Disney's origins are about being diversity friendly, and that really wasn't where its origins were. I mean, this dude was a blatant racist. I mean, like, there were like hints of things about minstrel shows even in like the cartoon Dumbo. So I think that you need to think about the motives of the individuals who are putting these things out. Black people, you have no allies. Let's be clear, you have no allies. So a big commercialized white media company is not there to serve your best interests, no matter how much you try to, quote unquote, change the scope or try to have seats at the table to change it. So black people, they love to take something that was originally racist, that this is a big thing, and they don't care, like, or for people who don't care about black lives, from like change that thing that people who don't care about black lives change what they made into a thing that is about black empowerment. And they like to feel empowered because they changed that narrative, which is absolutely absurd when you can just create it for yourself. And a lot of people's arguments, I feel, to that would be, well, Marvel and DC and this and that wouldn't be where they are today unless they appeal to certain crowds by doing A, B, C, and D, and that meant excluding us. A lot of people like to talk about things in the past that are irrelevant. The bottom line is, we're here right now in a space where we have the power to create those things, but here we are still championing this, I guess, crumbs or these trinkets that you're describing from the past. So now you're like, okay, well, we're going to continue to champion Marvel and DC and make excuses for why they did A, B, C, and D, and why they don't give us proper characters and this and that. When we now, at this point in our lives, have the power to take matters into our own hands, make our own characters, and create stories in the way that we want other people to see them, if we want other people to see them. Really, my goal personally isn't necessarily for that. It's for the purpose of having black characters where black kids can see them and they can be inspired by them, and that we can enjoy them without having this strange thought or notion of, is the dude who created this stuff, does he have some weird views? Was he racist? Was something wrong with him? Did he have issues with some of the people he talked about? With someone like me, you don't have to have that issue, because the thing is that I'm creating stories about our people, and you know exactly what my views are when you listen to me on my podcast, or you listen to the things that I say on Instagram, or whatever the case is. As far as black carbon copies go, I think it's a bunch of bullshit at the end of the day too, because yes, you got characters like Miles Morales, who was interesting, and yes, you got Sam, who's now Cap, and that's cool and all. Yes, you got a black Iron Man, which now is Iron Heart, which is really a black woman, but there's no originality. Thought and concern are not even put into these characters. They just literally take a character that has white origins, make them black. Now everyone is going to just refer to this new character as a black version of the white person that they originally were, and then try to treat it like it's some form of normalcy. So in other words, this character being white, that was a standard of normalcy. This black version right here is now the black version of that normalcy, as if being black is abnormal. Like, just think about the subconscious thought process in that. Like, you literally have already idolized or normalized whiteness in a way where it is the set standard, and a black character who was created based off of that is something that is totally out of whack, different, and something that is secondary. That's why it's a copy. It's not the original. And that's just folly, and in its own way is a bit anti-black. Now on Instagram, someone commented when I made a post that talked about a lot of the stuff that we're talking about right now. And what they told me is that it's not necessarily a copy, or some of the characters that I talked about weren't copies. And to give you context, I think the characters that I talked about were Jon Stewart as Green Lantern. I talked about, I think, Wally West, who's now black. I talked about Aqualad, like the black Aqualad, and then there was I think one other character, I can't remember who was on that post, but regardless, he said that it's not necessarily a copy, or these characters, some of these characters aren't copies because the personality, name, and all that changes. He said that there's a difference between a race swap and passing of the mantle. So my first problem in response to that is, well, duh. They aren't just going to just make them the exact same character. Hell, they changed the personality of white superheroes from comic to TV show, or comic to movie, or movie to a different comic book when making different versions, and it's the exact same character. White to white, that is. So to me, that's really a non-factor as a talking point. The point is, doing this and expecting black people to smile and nod is a complete... because of complete lack of originality, makes the statement about caring more about diversity so that white people shine brightly than it does about challenging the issues that you see right now and thinking about ways that we as black people can tell our own stories properly. So we're now in this mindset now of defending these decisions that white people make that are for their own benefit that we don't call out, instead of just going and making our own thing. It's all about end goals. Plus, people will not see these new black characters as separate from the original when they see it. They will always recognize them as the black version of fill in the blank when they see them. So, for example, you see somebody like, again, Green Lantern, you see Jon Stewart, you're going to say, oh yeah, that's the black version of Hal Jordan. Like, you just know, like, Hal Jordan was that original character, but then you got Jon Stewart, who everybody for the most part recognizes from the Justice League series. That's where he's known from. But in most other, like, little iterations, you always see the Hal Jordan version. Hell, you even see the Hal Jordan version in Injustice. They didn't even have Jon Stewart as the standard there. Also, with passing of the mantle, that sounds like some chosen Negro type shit. Like, black people need to stop really stop defending and getting instant gratification that they got some hand-me-downs from white origins. When in actuality, if you look at our history, especially just the scope of the superhero characters that we see today, I mean, a lot of those characters were literally taken and ripped from Egyptian gods. Like black gods who were from Egypt. And they made them into the superhero characters that we see, repackage them and shoot them back to us in the form of movies that we pay for to watch, TV shows, and things like that. So why should we be now happy that they're literally stealing our ideas, repackaging them, and then they're saying, oh, we didn't recognize you black people, although all our ideas came from you, so let me give you a black character instead, and then we should sit there and just be happy that we got that hand-me-down. That's what I said, that's some chosen Negro type shit. I'm not with that. And it brings me back to this ongoing thing that I keep hearing about Sam. You know the character Sam Wilson, who is Falcon in Marvel? And it brings me back to this long discussion that people had about how he needs to, quote unquote, earn his role as Captain America. But I'll talk about that a little bit more on another podcast. The one simple point that I just wanted to make is, look at how that situation panned out. It's like these white people are saying that, but not white people. It's like these white people and off-code black people are now saying, you should be proud to see a character like Sam Wilson take up the mantle of a character like Captain America, like a white dude. So this black man takes up the mantle of a character like Captain America, which was Steve Rogers, this white dude who really essentially was kind of given his power. Sam is out here, he has no, super serum to be all cock diesel and to be all strong and stuff and to never tire like Captain America can. And he's still told that even after everything that he went through in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, that he's not ready for the mantle as Captain America. Like, there's so many problems in that discussion. But again, I won't get into all those because the topic at hand here is talking about the black carbon copies, not to talk about that specific problem. But we'll break that down a little bit later. I just wanted to make the point that the idea of passing of the mantle and being deserving of it and how we should be proud of that, it just brings me back to that conversation about Sam not being worthy. Black people should not have to settle, though, for characters that don't tell unique stories and are only worthy of this pity representation and also, as my man in the comments said, passing of the mantle. People will eat it up because Marvel and DC and companies like that are big time, and that's all they have to go off of popularity-wise. But that's why I want to create my own comic brand. See, this is one thing I want you all to understand. My goal is to give people something else to look at. The reason why we focus on things like Marvel and like DC is because essentially there are these big brands that everybody knows about, and we feel like those are our only go-tos in order to enjoy superhero things, supernatural things, and whatever is in that lane. We look at these big commercialized companies, but really, that's because we feel like those are our only options. I'm not saying that they are. I mean, there's a lot of independent comic creators, and there's also other comics that we're not even discussing in this podcast right now. But I just think that there needs to be another option, especially for black people, because our stories are not being told properly, and we're being put into all these weird and crazy tropes that we really don't deserve to be in, and then are told to just smile and shut up and not to be upset about what we see. We need something that tells different stories and shows how culturally vast we are. And that's why I'm trying to make my, as I like to call it, blurred empire. I want to make an entire comic brand where I create all these great, wonderful and exciting and interesting black characters that people can just choose from. You don't have to cherry pick and look at these different characters and be like, oh, this dude, this is black Superman, this is black Batman. We shouldn't have to do all that. We're like scraping the bottom of the barrel at this point to try to find characters that we can just relate to, that look like us but also are unique and have nothing to do with the original whiteness they came from. Now let's think about how few characters you see that are copies, like legit carbon copies of white characters, versus the ones that you see authentically, and think about how many of those are either not recognized, not a main character, are a secondary character, or have some type of weird trope attached to them. Like, really think about it. Like, just listen to this for a second. Some of the characters that are carbon copies, and I just want to say a bunch of them just so you can kind of see the difference in the two, are Kid Flash, who is black now, in some places that is, Black Aqualad, you have a black Iron Man and Ironheart, you have a black Captain Marvel, you have a black Captain Marvel in Monica Rambeau, you have a black Captain America now in Sam Wilson, you have black Wonder Woman to a certain extent in Nubia. You have black Superman to a certain extent in Steel. You have a black Batman to a certain extent in Batwing. And now Batwoman as well too. She's black as well now because you have Ryan Wilder. You have a black Green Lantern in Jon Stewart. And you have a black Spider-Man in Miles Morales. So I listed off quite a bit. That's and I'm going to count while I'm sitting here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. That's 11. I just named 11 characters that are carbon copies of somebody who was originally white. And then when I think of characters that are actually big time black characters, the ones that come to mind are Black Lightning, Luke Cage, Black Panther, and Static Shock. That's 11 to 4. So you mean to tell me you have 11 carbon copies and 4 authentic characters? And hell, I could even break that down even further. Black Lightning and Static Shock are just electric Negroes, so they're in their own little trope that I think probably could be discussed in another episode. But regardless, we'll take them. But there's already originality issues because they're focusing so much on black characters being electric. I don't get it. Why are there so many black characters that are electric? I just don't get it. And Static, if I'm being honest, is only popular really in the eyes of fans, but production studios haven't really done much with them. And I get it. There were some issues there with Warner Brothers and DC and all this other stuff. I understand that, but I guess I'm just saying that he's mostly popular in the eyes of fans, and that's mostly why I would even put him on the big time main character list. But at this point, we've got Luke Cage now and Black Panther, and even they have some tropes attached to them, but I won't hit up on them too much. I'm just going to say that they count as original characters. Now, there's probably a few more that I'm forgetting, but for the most part, I mean, you got 11-4. I mean, think about it. Like, that's nearly triple the original characters. That's nearly triple. If I named one more character that was a carbon copy, and I'm sure I probably missed a couple, that would have been triple the amount of characters that I was able to think of that were original. So triple carbon copy to original character ratio for black characters. That's something else, ain't it, y'all? That's something else. So, again, this is why I made my own comic brand, and I want to eventually put out all of these stories. So I have all of these unique black stories that I'm putting out there that represent all different black people in the diaspora. And I want to eventually have my own production studio even. So that's me now big picture thinking. I want to have my own production studio because it's cool to make all these stories and to say, hey, I got all these black characters and I have all these interesting dynamics that I made in them, and I even put them in their own world so you can see how they interact with each other and cross over. But producing them on my own terms is my main goal, because what I'm seeing is I can make all these interesting stories that could be raw, different, unique, whatever you call it, but then they're not necessarily telling a story that some of these production studios will want. So they want to change up what I'm saying and put in these weird tropes and put in these weird agendas and put in these things that don't really need to be in there. And then guess what? It's a whole new story. It's not even mine no more. So I don't know. For me, I got to be able to get to a point where I have my own production studio so I can do things on my own terms. So the reason why this is so important to me is because I think that we as black people need autonomy, not just to tell our own stories, but to be able to put them out without anybody's interjection, anybody's correction, or anybody's idea of telling you that what you're saying doesn't make sense or gives the wrong message. Again, me even bringing that up brings me back to the mindset of what they did to that brother on American Gods. I brought up that example before. I don't know if I brought it up on another podcast episode, but I brought it up for sure in the Instagram space, and how they were telling him when he was playing the god Anansi, how some of the things that he was saying was giving the wrong message to black people, and these were white producers saying that. And mind you, the worst part about that was the brother who played Shadow Moon didn't even back this dude up. That's what I'm talking about. White people, and then the off-code black people who don't even back us up. They rather join forces with them and continue to stomp us out while they already see us on the ground. That's why we got to make our own stuff. Because really what I want to do is I want to be able to own my own stuff, produce my own stuff, and I want to work with people who are like-minded. I want to work with individuals who have similar mindsets and can see this vision as well too, and see the importance of putting out things about our people on our own terms. This is a real quick story, and I hope he gets a chance to listen to this, but I have a cousin who lives in Arizona, and him and I just linked up for the first time ever. I think it's the first time I ever met this dude, just a few months back. And he's really into film, heavily into film. And him and I were on the same wavelength as far as the way that we think about stuff, as far as the way we think about pro-blackness, as way as we see the future for black people, the things that we care about, and our values and things like that. And I think, I'm just thinking about like-minded individuals. It would be nice to work with somebody like him and maybe some other people who, maybe one day I could partner with and make these moves happen for real. So for example, he's got this talent in being able to film, and I don't know how he'd feel about the whole production thing, but it would be cool to have somebody like him filming like some of these like stories that I'm making as comics and hopefully turning into either TV shows or movies. It'll be really cool to have people like him or him, you know, doing the work out there just like me to try to get a different narrative told. So for me, I have a plan for the future for my characters, and it's not just in the self-interest of my brand. It's all about thinking about the comic fans and thinking about blurs and who are like me and how we want to see our people represented properly. So in other words, I want to see my ideas not just be comic books and be things that people can just pick up and read at a comic store. I want them to literally have life. I want to see these characters being portrayed by actors and actresses and see people attach themselves to these different characters that they're watching on the screen, because what we're noticing is that people don't really feel like they have time to read. So there's not a lot of people reading comic books per se, unless like you're a true blur, like that's your thing, that's your thing. Unless you're doing something like that, like typically people, they rather watch a movie or listen to a podcast or hear something while they're doing something else. People are big on multitasking. They're big on that type of thing, right? So that's why I want to see a breathe life in other spaces. So I want to see it on TV. I want to see it in video games. I want to see it again in movies. I want to see it as action figures for kids. Like that is my whole thing, just having a very big vision. Now I'm going a little off topic here. I just wanted to just say that. But the reason why all of this kind of relates and kind of gels together and whatnot is because we as Black people desperately need to just be very, very careful and vigilant about what we decide to celebrate. You shouldn't just be cool because you see, or, you know, be celebratory because you see a black face somewhere and think that that's progress. Sometimes we need to challenge what we see and think about ways that we can do something that tells our story and represents us the way that we deserve to be represented. We are not, and I mean this, y'all, please listen to me, please hear my words, please hear what I got to say. We are not obligated to like or not criticize a black character when we see them on screen just because they're black, especially if they're doing something that we really don't rock with. You are not obligated to do that. I want to just make that very clear. Anyway, y'all, I got a couple things I gotta get to. I just wanted to make sure that I got this podcast out there for y'all to enjoy, for y'all to listen to me, y'all to hear my talking points. If you like this, then feel free to tune in because I'm going to have a lot more to come. I really appreciate everybody who took the time to listen to me and everything that I had to say about the Black carbon copy trope. I have, again, a lot more topics to come in the near future, and I will make sure that I will let y'all know on Instagram, if you follow me, when I'm going to have new episodes coming out. So make sure that you're following me at my YouTube or my Instagram page at Colas Creative. And also too, feel free to keep checking me out on multiple different platforms. I'm on Anchor. I'm on Google Podcasts, and soon I'm going to make sure that I get myself up onto Apple as well too, so you all will be able to check it out there. Anyway, I hope y'all have a good and productive rest of your Friday, because today is Friday, and I will be talking to y'all soon. Peace.